and just weeks after the country's largest broadcaster, ABS-CBN, was denied a new franchise by Congress based substantively on allegations of bias against Mr. Duterte and tax evasion. The government insists all cases against Rappler and ABS-CBN have been independent of influence from the president's palace.
Twitter says it will ban thousands of accounts that promote the QAnon conspiracy theory, which claims a deep state is plotting against President Trump. Twitter said it had decided to act because followers were causing increasing harm. Last year, the FBI warned against conspiracy theory-driven domestic extremists. A $6 billion lawsuit against the mining giant BHP is being lodged by thousands of Brazilian groups and individuals in the British city of Manchester today. The claimants allege that the Anglo-Australian company ignored safety warnings about a dam which collapsed in 2015 in Brazil's Minas Gerais state. 19 people died. British government sources have said new security laws are being considered following a highly critical report on Russian interference in the UK. Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee said the authorities had taken their eye off the ball and had not treated the threat from Russia as a priority. It suggested a new law, an Espionage Act, to make it explicitly illegal to be a spy in the UK. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, spoke about the new law on behalf of the government on Wednesday.
We're looking at this new form of law, which would be about the registration of foreign agents, so that if somebody has not registered, that becomes an immediate reason for them to be extradited or sent away from the country in whichever form. We've been saying this to Parliament during this period, that we're working on this new form of legislation.
The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Denmark for talks that are expected to include the Arctic region. He'll seek to mend fences after President Trump cancelled a visit to Denmark last year, saying the Danish Prime Minister had been nasty to him in rejecting his offer to buy Greenland. A Pakistani journalist who was briefly abducted yesterday has thanked all those for raising their concerns, which he says made his quick release possible. Matiullah Jan, a critic of Pakistan's powerful military and Imran Khan's government, was abducted by a group of men in Islamabad outside his wife's school. His seizure, which was captured on CCTV, prompted alarm from rights groups. BBC News.
Britain, 1942. It's just before Christmas, and the country is in the midst of war. In London, a baby boy just a few weeks old is abandoned near the River Thames.
I'm holding here an extract from the Daily Mirror on Monday the 21st of December 1942, and it says a blue-eyed boy, 4 weeks old, wrapped in a bright blue jacket, part of a woman's costume, has been found abandoned on Victoria Embankment. He is now in a Chelsea institution. Well, that baby boy was me.
That's Tony May, the person at the centre of this story. He has spent his whole life wondering where he came from. Most of us take the knowledge of who our birth parents are for granted. But for Tony, it was a complete blank. His papers labelled him a foundling, a Victorian word used to describe a child left by its parents and found by strangers.
What a thing to do, to leave a baby on Victoria Embankment with all these people going up and down. You run the risk, don't you, in a bright blue costume, of being spotted, don't you? It just mystifies me as to why this spot was chosen.
Just a few years ago, Tony desperately wanted to know who had left him and why. But he had no leads to go on. Now, thanks to the advances in DNA technology, Tony has discovered more than he ever dreamt possible. But this sort of journey is not without its risks, as there is no telling what secrets you will uncover. This is Embankment Baby on the BBC World Service. I'm Claire Bates, and I'll be sharing Tony's story with you with help from some of the people he's met along the way. So Tony, we're in Victoria Embankment Gardens. The Thames is running right alongside us, and from here we can see the Waterloo Bridge, but the Victoria Embankment runs all the way from Westminster.
Yeah.
That's quite a large area. So
It is, but there's quite a few seats on there which I could quite easily be left on one of those for somebody to pick me up.
And of course, when you were found in 1942, it was the middle of World War II. The Blitz, the German bombing, had happened the year before. At night time, there would have been a blackout. It was a very, very different time. How do you feel kind of trying to picture yourself here in 1942?
Well, it's difficult because we don't exactly know where I was found, but it was somewhere along this stretch. And of course, I wonder whether I was found during the day or at night.
I mean, we know from historic weather records it was a mild day.
Right.
We know sunset would have been about 4:45.
Yeah.
But everything else is supposition, which...
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
When I was found, obviously nobody knew who I was. I was given the name of Victor Banks because I was found on Victoria Embankment.
Of course, yeah.
And that was on my documents for quite a while. So I assume I was called Victor Banks everywhere I went until I was adopted.
And do you like the name?
Victor Banks? Yeah, I do actually. I use it sometimes when I'm writing rude letters to people.
Yeah. Tony is clearly a jazz fan. There are piles of CDs dotted around the lounge in his home an hour north of London. The walls are covered with photos of music legends like Miles Davis. Oh, you took that photograph?
Me?
Yeah. Now in his 70s, he has close-cropped white hair, and though he moves around slowly, he has a certain energy about him.
Shall we say that's yours then?
There are lots of family photos on the mantelpiece. Tony's two grown-up children, Richard and Karen, that he had with his ex-wife Valerie, and some of his grandchildren. There are also pictures of Arthur and Ivy May, the couple who adopted Tony in 1944.
My mum and dad, Arthur and Ivy, they didn't have any brothers or sisters at all. So, but they had friends who we called aunt and uncle. So they were all lovely to me as well. It was just lovely.
The Mays later adopted a girl called Eleanor, who became Tony's younger sister. So how old were you when you found out you were adopted?
Oh, I was quite young, I think, 7 or 8, 9. They just said, by the way, you're adopted, that was all. So no, it was just no big deal, really, And I remember at school, people would come up saying, I understand from your sister you're adopted. And she went around telling everybody, and I was so embarrassed.
Tony was very close to his adoptive father, Arthur, who was proud of his son's sporting prowess and would show up at every school athletics event. Tony would eventually follow his dad into banking. Despite their bond, Tony recalls that his adoption was rarely mentioned by Arthur.
I remember once my dad, Arthur, he knocked on my bedroom door when I was a teenager and he said, can I have a word with you? I said, yeah, Dad. He said, what music is that you're listening to? I said, it's John Coltrane on tenor sax, playing ballads. All right, he said, do you think you play such mournful music because you were adopted? I said, no, Dad. This is world-class music that's played all over the world by this genius man. It's nothing to do with the talk. But oh, okay, then off he went. There was no dialogue, We never sat around and ever talked about anything much at all. You'd rather talk to friends than your parents, really, about most things.
But on Tony's wedding day, Arthur made a surprise revelation.
And then I can remember when I got married, when I was 23, my dad sidled over to me after the service and he said, just to say that when you get back from your honeymoon, I've got an envelope for you. All right, what's in it, Dad, as well? Your exam passes, but most importantly, your adoption order. I said, okay, fair enough. He said, but there's a word on it that you might not know about. I said, what is that? He said, foundling. I said, no, I've never heard it. He said, just letting you know. All right.
And when did you find out what foundling meant?
I didn't. We were on honeymoon. I just didn't twig for ages. You know what? And then much later, I'm thinking, right. So I was abandoned. Was I? It took me ages and ages till I was about 50, I think, to think about it seriously.
He says he's a people pleaser and lacked confidence when he was younger. He's often wondered if his unusual start in life has affected his personality.
You know, I laugh and joke and muck about and all that, but I feel I'm not tactile and I'm not sort of, I can't think of the word. I'm fairly reserved, I would say, about giving emotion to me. Yeah, that's it. Giving to me. I can cry my eyes out watching a rugby match or something like that, but something else. And things on telly, I cry all the time, you know.
When Tony had children of his own, he wondered how on earth his parents could have abandoned him.
I used to go sometimes to open evenings at school, and we'd be in the queue to see the teacher, and I'd say my name, they'd say, "Oh, wow," and I could tell they were a pleasure. Both of them were pleasures to teach, and I thought, there was me found in the street, and I've got kids that this woman's raving about. You know, it's just who on earth abandoned me? You fool! You know, what did you do that for?
He had a theory about his origins.
Maybe 1942, the war was on. Maybe I was the son of an American GI who wouldn't even know I exist, wouldn't know about me at all. So that was my initial thought.
The Yanks are coming with a vengeance. Within 7 weeks of the USA declaring war on Germany, picked American troops have followed Mr. Churchill quickly across the Atlantic.
The American soldiers quickly gained a reputation and were described at the time as overpaid, oversexed, and over here. It's thought more than 22,000 children were born in Britain between 1942 and 1945 to British mothers and American soldiers. And Tony speculated he might be the result of such a liaison.
An overwhelming majority of the lads come from the Middle West, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Few had ever seen the sea before leaving on this trip as members of the United States Army Forces in the British Isles.
You know, it just occurred to me that might well have been the case because it was happening in London.
Tony was in his 50s when he decided to try to find his birth parents. He was prompted by a chance remark after his mother and father had died.
Tony's on his own now, back where he started. My father-in-law said that, and I thought, oh, right, I think I'll try and find out then a bit more about myself if I can, yeah.
Tony's first port of call was the London Record Office. He was astonished to discover he wasn't allowed to look at his own adoption file and had to wait outside while a social worker went in and took notes. Outraged, he launched a campaign in the media and managed to get the rules changed. Among his papers, Tony found reports about his early fostering by his parents Ivy and Arthur May before they adopted him.
This is a letter from London County Council to my dad. Date on which visit made, 5th of November 43. Is the child well cared for? The answer is she devotes her whole time and attention to the baby, and he is responding well to individual care and is becoming interested in people and things. Are the applicants satisfied with the child? They are very pleased, yeah, with him and delighted to have a baby of their own. Lovely there.
Tony's file revealed that he was found somewhere on the Victoria Embankment on